Thank you for having me. So my name's Joel. It's hard to believe, but I'm 52 years old. I'm wearing a natty blue with little white polka dot spots shirt, and I'm sitting in the guest bedroom in Maidenhead where all my work happens. So it's lovely to be here. I'm delighted that so many of you have come. It's always a bit of a fear that you might be talking to two people. So thank you very much for coming, and I hope we're going to have a session that's enjoyable, but more importantly, useful to you as you think about using email to raise money from your communities. I'm interested to know what sorts of organisation we've got in the room, partly because I'm going to run another session in a little while, and I'm just interested in the kinds of people that are connected to youth music and the types of organisations. So I don't know if you could perhaps sort of raise hands, with the sort of hand raise sort of emoji function thing, as we go through the list to give me an idea of the structure of your organisation, because I think there may be a mix in the room. So I don't know if people can just sort of do a raised hands if they're representing a registered charity. Okay, yeah, so quite a few of those. 4, 5. Great. Thank you. Or a few more. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Yeah, so quite a good number. Or is your organisation, if you could raise your hands, if your organisation's a CIC, Community Interest Company? Yeah, okay. A few of those. That's great. Anybody here from a company, from a corporate organisation? Okay. And then is anybody considering changing? Is the organisation considering a change of structure from one to another? Perhaps taking the jump from a CIC into a charity. Pros and cons with that, of course. Okay. All right, thank you. That's helpful. What I would say is that if you're in one structure and not another, there's nothing in this presentation that you can't do. There are a couple of platforms we'll talk about that won't be appropriate for non-charities, but other than that, everybody can fundraise. There's no sort of limits to that. There may be limits in terms of donors' tax effectiveness and things like that, and not being able to get gift aid, but yeah, just useful to have a sense of who's in the room. So thank you for that. So, what we're going to cover, the objective really is to give you some practical ideas about how email can be used to generate interest and awareness, but also crucially funding for your activities. We're going to break the session down into 5 parts, really. So, we're going to talk about how we get people onto our lists. How we then communicate with them in a sort of regular and sort of in a way that will sort of move them through the sort of marketing funnel, as it were, from sort of interest and awareness right through to actually taking action. We're going to talk about the importance of really being proactive when you're gathering the content that you're going to send to people. That's absolutely key. And then going to talk in a bit of detail about how you might think about sort of asking people to get involved, to come on board, to give, to be active supporters for your work. And then we're going to try and make it quite practical. So we're going to think about the platforms you might use, what the costs might be, but particularly about the sort of the human capital, the resource that you'll need to apply to this, because you'll need to keep this work going. It's not a sort of one hit and then you're done kind of thing. This is very much an ongoing piece of work that you'll have to sort of think about scheduling in to our busy working lives. So you've got to think about how that's going to be managed. I've written the session so that it should hopefully be helpful to you if you're already managing email lists, sending out communications, but also to people who might be starting out or might be starting out in fundraising using email rather than primarily as a communication tool. So you're welcome to ask questions as we go. We've got an hour and 15, so we've got plenty of time, and I haven't done loads and loads of slides. I'm absolutely delighted that some of you have asked questions already, because that doesn't mean at the end I'll go, any questions, and everyone says no and just leaves. So thank you for doing that. So we'll come to those and we'll cover those off as well. If you want to raise your hands to speak, because I'm sort of in the big slides, Phoebe, if you could let me know if there's hands that I don't see, please, that'd be super. Use the chat to ask questions or speak once I've spotted your hands, if you'd prefer to do that. Yeah, as Phoebe says, lovely to see your faces, but it's your session, so cameras on or off, do what feels comfortable to you. So a little bit about me. 20 years as an in-house fundraiser. I did about 15 months working for an office furniture company after graduation. It didn't bring me great joy, I have to be honest. The Sunday dread was real, and so I made a kind of conscious attempt. We all, as fundraisers, fall into the profession a little bit, but I did at least think what might give me a bit more purpose in my life. Spend a third of your life working, don't you? So I was really fortunate to get a job with WaterAid, and then spent about 10 years working for international organisations, voluntary service overseas, and then Amnesty International, and then the next 10 years working for the four UK health and social care medical research charities along the bottom, finishing as Director of Fundraising at the Hospice of St Francis in Berkhamsted. And then I've spent the last 7 or 8 years now sort of working with a range of charities as a sort of freelance fundraiser. Sometimes that's a bit of consultancy or training. Quite often it's doing interim roles, maternity covers, or there's a bit of a gap and people need a bit of support. I also teach the fundraising apprenticeship, which I love. And my current role, which is why it's a bit bigger, is Director of Fundraising at Caudwell Youth, and I'll be doing that until January, alongside keeping some of my other things going. So interesting times with government youth strategies, and potential funding coming out of that. So I'm sure you'll be aware of that. There may even be opportunities to bring some of our young people at Caudwell Youth into sort of creative sessions and music-based sessions as well. So there may be more synergies to come between the types of work that you're doing and the work that Caudwell Youth does. So before we sort of dive right in, I thought it'd be useful just to think about what your organisations will need, either to start. So if you're beginning this process of thinking about using email for fundraising, or to scale up your existing activities. So I think these are the key elements, and I think it's worth being kind of realistic about this as well. Before sort of starting or thinking, okay, do we need to get a bit more resource or a bit more sort of structure or a bit more buy-in possibly in place before we really sort of get going. So I think the personnel piece, as ever at work, is key. You're really going to need to find the right person or people, but I think it's really helpful if someone kind of owns a good part of this. They need the time to do this properly, and they need the energy, and they need to be sort of interested in how to tell stories, how to bring your organisation to life for a sort of a fairly wide and broad cross section of the general public that are in your communities and that might want to help. So it's a long-term thing, as I've said, and you need that person to keep sort of pushing it forward. There is an investment, I think, an organisational investment in sending the emails, gathering the content, using the right sort of platforms to store supporter data. So there's some infrastructural cost, and we'll look at some of those options a bit later in the presentation. Organisationally, I think we're going to need to understand that it's a long-term activity, and actually, I think those of you who are already doing it will know that you kind of don't start doing it, and the money doesn't start rolling in big sort of numbers. Necessarily. So it's probably something that you're going to need to build, and you're going to have to be realistic about the time frame of sort of getting bigger returns. One of the good things that all the sort of software companies and the platforms recognize, or at least most of them, is that you need to sort of start with costs that are manageable, and then those costs typically scale as you start to sort of get more people on your list. You start to have more transactions to process. You start to have a bigger community of people being involved. But yeah, it's not an overnight success, this one, I suspect, and it's worth kind of having an understanding internally about that within your orgs. And then the other one's a kind of a bit of a cultural thing, and particularly for organisations that might be funded by local authorities primarily, or the Arts Council, or organisations like Youth Music. There's something about sort of asking for donations, which you need to kind of get used to, actually, and you need to get comfortable with. There's a sense that it can be difficult for us. There's a little bit of sort of British reserve sometimes. It's a bit, don't like to ask for money, don't like to ask for help. And actually, we've got to really understand and sort of frame it in our own minds, I think, as giving people the opportunity to do something, powerful, to do something really impactful in their communities. So we're welcoming them in, we're encouraging them to kind of be partners in our work. And I think the other thing is that sort of this is all test and learn stuff, lots of digital communications, digital fundraising and marketing. You'll find what works. So I think being willing to say, can you help? And then being willing to learn the best ways of asking for that help is a really important feature as well. So we're going to say a bit about gathering email addresses, because this is something that we're going to need to do. We are in the business of sort of building email addresses, and it doesn't happen, without a bit of work and a bit of planning and a bit of thinking. So it's really crucial that people can sign up easily, and there's lots of ways in which they can join your mailing lists. I think it's also really helpful if you can find ways to sort of encourage people to do it, and give them an idea that it's going to be something they'll want to do. They're going to be sort of messages that they're going to want to receive. So think about how you can kind of incentivize that initial participation as well. And I've got an example in a couple of slides of a charity doing that quite effectively, I think. I think we're probably trying to get adults, we're trying to get people who have the means to support us. We're working with a client group of young people, and if young people are able to give us their pocket money and would like to, that's marvellous. But I think primarily we're talking about people who have the means to do it. So we need to think about everybody on that list we're comfortable asking for money from. And you can obviously segment your audiences, and if you've got a list that is primarily for young people, then you can think about the communications you'd like to send to them. So some ways of getting email addresses, the obvious one, I suppose, and the one that probably, if you're sort of in this game already, you may well have, is the sort of sign up box on the website. So I quite favour a pop up, and this is quite controversial because a lot of people hate them, don't they? But I the box that's really the new sort of web designs last couple of years, it's very much linear, isn't it? And you scroll and scroll and you scroll. If that box is at the bottom, no one's getting down that low, alongside your sort of corporate address and all that stuff. There's a real danger it won't get seen. So shoot me, I'm in favour of pop-ups. You want sign up forms if you've got sort of parents or carers who are sort of signing their young people up. Then yeah, ask for permission to tell them about the wider work of your organisations and ways they can help. So you're collecting information, you're collecting data. Just make sure we're sort of getting them to tick a box to say that they're happy to hear more from you. So if you do sort of monitoring forms, exit forms, at the end, all the ways you're collecting data. If you sell tickets to productions at your venue, you'll probably need the email address for the purposes of communicating that transaction's gone through successfully. But use that opportunity again to collect that data and collect permission. QR codes are good. Give people a sense of the value in signing up to it. If you can say you can learn more about our work, how you can support it, get discounts or whatever. If there's ways of making it attractive to people, that's helpful. And just kind of really make sure that you're sort of covering all bases there as far as you can. But be data protection compliant. We need to be careful that people are clear about the purpose to which their data will be put. So you sometimes hear or see rather people say sign up for our newsletter, and you can understand why, because that's good shorthand, isn't it? People understand what they're doing, but actually if you want to fundraise, you really ought to be asking them to hear more about the work and ways they can help as well. You can frame it in whatever way you want, but people shouldn't be surprised if they do get a fundraising message after having signed up. So it's better to include just a little bit of text if you can. So here's a charity action for ME. Latest activities, news and campaign information. I'd like to see a bit on, you don't necessarily have to say fundraising, but certainly ways you can help would be a good sort of way to frame that. We don't want to scare people off, but equally we want to make sure we're compliant. And there's always the thing in fundraising that people sort of would never ask to have fundraising, but they're often quite happy to get it as well. So, but what we do want to make sure is that we have full permission, and if we had to sort of account for our marketing to the Information Commissioner's office, we'd be squeaky clean on that. I quite like this shelter online form. They ask for postcode, but then they explain why they want it, so that's useful. So thinking about that question of, will you have young people joining your lists, the list you're using for fundraising? You could have date of birth, and if you did have date of birth, then you'd explain, perhaps why you wanted to capture that. So this is the one I mentioned earlier, which I think is really good. 10 emails feels quite a lot. This is Cancer Research UK, and this is on their homepage. But it gives you a reason to join their lists. So a 10 email journey offering you quick 2-minute reads straight to your inbox, and actually it's about reducing your risk of cancer. So a real you couldn't have a much bigger benefit, could you, in joining that list there? So, and then the sort of catch-all statement just below, hear about our latest breakthroughs, campaigns, and how you can help support our life-saving work by email. So, so good data capture there. Bit of a reason to do it from the person's point of view, and then covering all bases. So email journeys then, I'd say it's absolutely critical that you have the ability to send an automated email immediately when you get people's email addresses. As soon as they go into your system, you need to be sending something out to say, yes, we've got your email. Thank you for being part of our community. Welcome them in, give them give them a warm welcome. If we just wanted to add them to a monthly newsletter, then it might be less important. I'd still say it's good practice to do it so that the first thing they get from you after having signed up isn't kind of 20 to 30 days later, potentially. They've forgotten that they've done it by then. But I think it's crucially important, if we're going to be asking them to support, that we need to tell them we're glad they're here. We're beginning a relationship with these people, we hope. So welcome journey is going to be the critical one that you'll need to sort of plan and think through. So these are people who may know quite a bit about your organisation, or they may know nothing. So all we do know is that they've told us they're happy to hear from us. So what do we want to tell them? So this is a sort of suggested format, and I wouldn't, say kind of follow this slavishly, but I hope it's helpful to you to have a sort of idea of the kinds of things you might want to send in a welcome journey. So my suggestion is that initial one is really about, saying hello and giving them links to explore some of the work that you do. So have a look at our programs. That secondary message of follow us on social media is quite nice as well. We're saying, here we are, stay in touch. Email 2, if you can go straight to, the sort of the cause, the reason really for existing. So if you're, an organisation that works with young people through music, let's tell some stories about those young people. See our upcoming sessions. Again, you're sort of talking about the work, you're promoting potentially if there's sort of paid sessions coming up. So you're sort of starting to do that sort of cross-selling there as well as giving them a bit more detail. Behind the scenes ones is nice. So whether you're a venue or not, behind the scenes at our organisation, meet the team, start to personalise it. Give them an idea of who they're hearing from. And then what support makes possible, what donations make possible. You're starting to give them an idea that there's a role for them beyond sort of passive recipient of your emails. See the impact you can make. Learn how we're funded is quite helpful actually. You're sort of welcoming them in. At that point, you're giving them the lowdown really on sort of why. Funding, personal donations, why individual giving can really help your organisation by giving it some flexibility, sort of outside of your sort of core grant funding streams, for example. But yeah, give them a sense of kind of what it costs to run the organisation and how they can help. I think ways to get involved is great. I mean, you may not have loads of opportunities for people to volunteer, but if you did have volunteering programs, then that's really nice. Events, obviously, anything they can do in the community. Again, it's kind of see what's on, help us out. What can people do? And then I think once they know about you a little bit, give them that sort of opportunity to support. Make a clear ask. I think, ask them for regular support. They'll do it or they won't, but they won't do it if they're not asked. In my experience. So, and then if they can't make a regular gift, perhaps they'll make a one-off. So you can see over 2 weeks they've had a series of emails from us, which hopefully certainly inform their understanding of who we are, what we do, but also give them a reason to get involved and give them a role within our organisation, and an important one. So content gathering, this is, alongside gathering those email addresses, gathering the stories and gathering the content is a continual activity. It's not something that we can sort of switch on and off. It'll work best when people sort of get into the swing of it and start to see. It's almost a journalistic instinct. There's a story there. And I think, everybody starts to become used to it as well when you've got sort of regular content happening. So, rough and ready films, we've all got phones that take brilliant footage, actually. And don't worry about it being kind of, really well shot, something sort of real and unvarnished actually is great for that. What we want is really to bring people's voice through. If you're working with young people and they're happy to be filmed and you've got all the consents, obviously, then get them talking to the camera. It's just really, really kind of engaging content, particularly if they're excited. It really transmits well. Just come off stage, or they're looking forward to a production they're doing, whatever it might be. Send email when you have something to say. So we finished the welcome journey, I should say. So this is kind of regular email broadcast stuff now. So don't feel that you've got to kind of, there isn't that there isn't enough there. We need to do loads of stuff in our email. That sort of Cancer Research UK, they made the point these are real short 2-minute reads. If you've got something that you think people will be interested in, then send it. You don't need to hold it to send with half a dozen other news items. And I'm not saying like the monthly e-newsletter, which we all sort of move towards, I think, organisationally, is a terrible, terrible thing. But if you've got something sort of little and often works really well, stay in touch with people. Don't feel like it all has to be sort of scheduled and bunged together. And I'd say don't worry about sending too many emails. We send so few emails compared to fundraising organisations in the States. There's cultural differences there, but they're also raising quite a lot more money via email proportionately than we are. And I think, some people might feel they're being over communicated with. And if we lose some people to the unsubscribe, that's not really the end of the world. We want to be talking to people who are engaged and who are interested. And I think, don't think, oh, we sent something last week, we can't send anything yet this week. I think just kind of be relaxed about that would be my advice. And then think about your tone of voice. If you are, a youth music organisation, we don't want to be coming over as crusty, do we? And sort of really dry and corporate. We're probably going to communicate with energy. It's probably going to be fun, our work. So really think about sort of conveying that. You don't have to be kind of zany, but actually there's going to be a life and an energy to the work that you do. So really make that come through for people. This is a bit vulgar, I'm sorry, but this whole thing about the organisational voice, we do this and we've been around since X date, try and avoid that if we can. Really try and be as personal as you can rather than sort of corporate. We say don't we on people, we this, we that. Really try and sort of make it one person communicating to another. It'll land much better. So just some ideas about types of content, really. As Phoebe said, we'll send the slides out. So if this is helpful to you, you'll have these to think about. So you'll have shows and programs and things that you want to let people know about. So that's a sort of a bit of a sort of always changing but evergreen sort of content type there. You'll want to sign people up. You'll want to sort of show more about the work that you're doing. Activity is great. So again, film is brilliant for that. Images of people, performance images, whatever it might be. Bring that voice of the people that you're working with, the young people forward. It's a bit of sort of show don't tell, isn't it? We can say how wonderful it all is, but actually the power of testimonials is significant, isn't it? And then blogs or video logs can be super helpful. Could be the sort of the head person in the organisation, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. But something that brings people in and that shares challenges and triumphs. I think we want to try and develop a relationship of kind of friendship, really, as far as we can, and certainly a relationship whereby people feel that they want to help. They're starting to get that sort of human impulse to help, and the more that they can understand about the need for that, the better. Social media content, well, you're sort of doing two jobs in one here, and this is the old comms rule, really, of never write anything twice. So make sure we're always sort of repurposing stuff that we've done for social into your email and vice versa. Reviews and milestones. So if you've sort of got annual reports or you're doing impact reports, send those, and you can actually, just say, hey, we thought you might be interested to see, and then just send a link to it. It doesn't have to have loads of other stuff there. Those that are interested will look. Other people are probably not going to be upset to have received it, even if they don't read it cover to cover. Team member contributions. So if you did have, the CEO or the senior person doing the regular blog, get somebody else in the organisation or a person you work with to do it. A day in their life, why they work for the organisation or why they decided to become involved as a participant. Again, that just kind of demonstrates the sense of community there and the people who are sort of working behind the scenes as well. Performance stuff, if you've got the rights for that, and it doesn't sort of compromise your sort of ticket sales, little snippets can be nice, can't they? Particularly if it's something that young people have worked hard towards, given the opportunity to share it on as well. Sector news relevant to yours, keep people updated, and then of course crucially these fundraising asks. So think about how people have a role and how you're going to sort of encourage them to sort of see themselves as active contributors in that way financially. So on to fundraising then. So this is a sort of a version of the fire triangle. Did you ever have to do this at school or in fire training in an organisation? The elements of a fire that are needed, and what is it? It's oxygen, fuel, and heat, I think, is the sort of classic fire triangle. So this is the fundraising triangle. This is what you need in order for a fundraising ask to be effective. And I think, if you haven't got one of these, it's going to be a less effective ask, I would suggest. So first of all, you need the need. Why do we need the help? What would happen if we didn't have the help? What will happen with the support that we're asking for? Urgency is helpful. And it can be as simple as kind of, you're giving people a deadline to respond. It could be urgent because, you need the money, otherwise something can't happen. And it could be a genuine sort of urgency. You'll know if you've ever worked with crowdfunders that is sort of played up quite strongly in that form of fundraising campaign. So you're giving people a deadline by which to respond in order that you can access match funding or in order for the campaign to be successful. So that sort of really sort of brings that urgency forward. And then, of course, if I gave, what would it do? What's the solution? What's your organisation doing that's going to actually have impact, that's going to bring benefit within the community? So here's some thoughts on how you can do that sort of fundraising piece, how you can frame your ask. That you might sort of ask yourself, why is your service, your project, your venue important? Why is it needed? And so thinking about it from the context of, I guess, young people, and this is sort of a little bit of guesswork on my part, so this may not be your context, but just some sort of some thoughts on that. There's not very much for young people to do. The government are finally responding to the lack of youth clubs and spaces by bringing in a bit of funding for that in certain areas. But there isn't very much for young people to do very often in our towns and cities. Is your area underserved by the youth provision? Is there a particular sort of challenge around finding good stuff for young people to do? What would happen if you didn't exist? What are the young people going to do without your work? What would be the deficit there? And then, of course, the really kind of positive things that to people and that coming together to create music can bring, and the talent development piece. These are the performers of tomorrow. That's obviously going to be important as well, and different things will be important to different organisations, more important. So the solution is kind of the work that you do. So we need to sort of describe that. It's always useful to think about what you do. That's your kind of secret sauce. What's distinctive about your work. What do you do better than anybody else? We have to be a little bit bold here. It's not very British. But yeah, why is your work so good? And then how do you know it makes an impact? So we do a lot of work now on a sort of evaluation, don't we, as voluntary sector organisations? But it's important that we're able to say we're really good and we know this because. And really bring that sort of impact forward. And one of the best ways to do that is to get testimonials from people who engage with your work as participants. How do they value your work? Getting the organisation again out the way a little bit and having that sort of person delivering the message directly can be very powerful. So that question about urgency then, so is there a deadline? There may be. You may need funding for something that's coming up and there may be a clear sort of time horizon on that. So if there is, then tell people. We talked about match funding, or I mentioned it briefly. So the Big Give Arts for Impact runs, I think, every June. So if you're up and running with an email list already, and you may already be doing this, of course, but it's something to think about if you're not. If you're developing and use an email list and you've got a cohort of people that you can be asking for, then it certainly does encourage some people, the idea of giving £20 and then the organisation getting £40. The match funding element can be another sort of another prompt for people to support. And then, if you haven't got anything that's crushingly urgent, then you can still use language to convey a sense of urgency. So, donate now, will you give today? Yes, I'll support, yes, I'll give X, so really sort of push people along. That call to action piece should certainly have some urgency within it.
Joel, can I just read out a comment?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So Alex from Team Oasis Children's Charity said, I found utilising the voices of our young people has a two-way benefit, not just for bringing our request to life, but it also empowers our young people, encouraging them to speak in spaces that they could not have ever thought they could.
Yes, thank you, Alex. That's lovely. We at Caudwell Youth, we have a Caudwell Youth collective who help us to take decisions about the direction of the organisation, and I think that's really important. And being sort of youth led and being responsive to young people is really key. But I think also, exactly as you say, Alex, giving people positions of authority, giving them a platform, giving them practice to sort of speak out and to work together and to collaborate is really valuable for its own ends, isn't it? So yeah, thank you very much for that. So other bits to think about when we're fundraising now. People give to people. It's absolutely true, and people are hardwired to help others. Actually, I mean, it can be pretty dispiriting, can't it? Catching up with the news on the daily. But actually, people are fundamentally predisposed. It's in our sort of it's in our makeup to help others. And we shouldn't forget that even at difficult geopolitical times within the community, if you give people a reason to help, then lots of people will do. But yeah, having someone tell their story, to Alex's point again, appealing directly to the potential donor can be extremely powerful. Again, just kind of the donor wants to see change, and we want to sort of persuade them that if they are able to support us, then that change will happen. And the organisation is the conduit for that, and that change doesn't happen without the organisation. But the organisation isn't necessarily the thing that the donor's giving to. The organisation's giving to create the impact. So, that sort of direct person-to-person ask can be very powerful. And then make the donor the hero. Give them the sort of central position in this story. They want to help solve the problem, so give them a sense of how they're going to do that. So again, not big on the organisation all the time, but big on we could do this with your help. This is what can be achieved with your help. And then a sort of a tactical piece, really. If you can find, price points, as we sort of call them as fundraisers, to make it tangible, to make it feel like if I gave £50, what would happen? What donors hate, they hate a number of things actually, but one of the things they hate is just the idea that their contribution, particularly because we're talking about £10, £20, £50, £5 or £10 a month, we're not talking about a king's ransom. They need to feel that it's not going to be a drop in the ocean, that it's going to have some impact. So one of the ways we can do that is by explaining what a donation of a particular size can do. That tangibility can be really important. And it just gives a bit of sort of energy to the ask then. So I was really pleased that we're getting on to the kind of boring, geeky bit here. So I was really pleased that some of the questions actually said they were keen to hear about this. So thank you very much, whoever mentioned that. But I think in terms of the sort of platform stuff, there are things that we'll need, and depending on where you are on your sort of journey of sending emails out and fundraising from your audiences, you may well have some of this. You may be thinking perhaps we haven't got quite the right platforms in place, or if you haven't started, then you've got some options, I think. So we're going to work through some of those. But my suggestion is that you need this tool to send the emails. I think that's probably quite obvious. I think you also need to be able to collect the money, because we're now not just communicating generally, but we're actually asking people to send payments. We want to collect regular gifts if we can. It would be great if people could take out regular gifts by means of direct debit, primarily. But then we also need to make sure we're storing the data correctly, so that we've got a picture of what people are giving, but also that we're able to upload new data to the email broadcast tool as well. Then again, we need the sort of the human resource to make it happen and to do the following, really. If we can automate as much of this as possible, clearly, then that is the way forward. But that will depend a little bit on your sort of either your internal sort of technical capacity or your ability to get somebody in to help you at the start, because actually, I think with a lot of this, there's a setup cost, but then, you're into the position where, you can manage it within your sort of ongoing staffing. But the key tasks really, again, are getting those sort of email list sort of collection points all set up. So the web form, the QR codes, all of your sort of data capture sources, making sure that we're getting emails from there. You've got to get the broadcast tool, and you've got to maintain audiences. If you are managing multiple audiences, that whether you've got children on one list or participants on one list, and you've got a broader list which is for sort of organisational messaging and fundraising, then you'll need to make sure that segmentation is sort of continues to work well. The content gathering, clearly, we've talked about crafting that welcome journey, and then also the ongoing comms. You might have other journeys in place. If you were to do a Christmas appeal, you certainly wouldn't just send one email and say, please give this Christmas and here's our appeal. You'd be sending a series of emails to people to give them opportunities, because we all know what it's like with email. Sometimes you've got time to read them, other times you're just trying to sort of get through them, and quite often delete before reading is a reality, isn't it? So and then there's something about thanking, isn't there? If we want an ongoing relationship with supporters, if they give us £20 and we want them to give us another £20 in the future, are they going to do it if we don't thank them, or if the thanking is kind of really not very meaningful or not very impactful? And then, just making sure we're sort of managing the data really, so that we know who's given, we know who they are, and we know what they've had from us. So I suppose I should say right at the start, I'm not paid by any of these companies, and also a lot of them I haven't really used. So I'm looking at this from sort of web research that I've done. A little bit of, I've heard good things about, and I guess the key thing is that I can't really make recommendations to you without knowing, who's in your organisation, what level of sort of technical capacity you can draw on, and where you are in your journey as well. I think these are quite important sort of decisions to make if you're setting out, certainly. And I think it's really important that the right people are kind of making those decisions, because it's unlikely to sit with just one person. So you need to make sure that people are able to input, and also obviously the more people who have sort of relevant expertise input into decisions like that, the better option you'll end up with, really. So we've said that we need a number of different things to make this program work, and the first is to be able to send emails out. So there's some quite interesting ones here. I've tried to think of the key elements of being, easy to use. It is pretty important. Relatively low cost. I don't think we want to be spending an absolute fortune on this. I think for the kind of messaging that we've talked about today, we're going to need to have automation. We're going to need to have those journeys able to be set up that can be plugged in and programmed and left to run. So first message day 1, second message day 3, and so on. So those are the sort of factors I think that we should be thinking about if we're making these kind of, I guess, purchasing decisions. So there's some big ones there. MailChimp is the sort of seems to be the kind of behemoth, really, doesn't it, of email sending. But there's other options as well that might be sort of interesting to your organisations. You'll see that a lot of them have this kind of freemium business model whereby they get you in while you haven't got hardly any people, and then the costs do sort of scale. So it's worth, when you're looking at these options, thinking about that, and we'll see that again with databases as well. So those costs do jump up. Of course, the big advantage of the freemium is that as the costs jump up, so hopefully are your revenues. You're bringing more people in, you're making those fundraising asks, you're raising money. So hopefully it's kind of it makes sense to sort of move on to the paid plans, or to pay more because you're getting the money coming in. So there's some options there, really. I don't think I can sort of talk through all of them, having not really used all of them. But I hear good things about Sending Blue, Brevo. So that might be one to look at. And some of them are more aimed at the sort of voluntary sector marketplace as well. Sequenzi being an example of that. So this was what I was sort of keen to understand at the start whether we've got sort of a mixture of charities, CICs, companies, and so on. A couple of these, Just Giving and CAF Donate, I wouldn't necessarily recommend them anyway, actually, for various reasons, but they are just for charities. I think CAF Donate, that's a pretty stonking processing fee they charge, so that I find a little bit off-putting. I don't think they're really collecting digital wallet payments either, so I'm sure they will be soon, but they're not doing that at this stage. Just Giving is, not very flexible, I think. But you might find that using an option like WordPress, if you've got a WordPress website, might be something worth considering. PayPal Giving is quite hard to use. The customer service, I think, is slow, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that one either. Infuse I've worked with quite a lot. That's very good from the sort of user end. It's quite clean. You can get your brand in there quite nicely, so it sort of looks like an add-on to your website, really, even though you're taking people to a third-party site. So I think that's good. And some of the databases have their own forms as well. So Beacon does, and Donify does, and has a really good integration with Stripe and Go Cardless to take the single and regular payments as well. I hadn't heard of People's Fundraising until I did a bit of a search for this presentation, but that seems to be a reasonably interesting offer there. There's quite a bit to like about low fees, about not doing what Just Giving do, which is sort of, put people up to 11 or 15% tip, for their donations. They have to really work hard to take that off. So that might be one to investigate. Beacon I've been using since I came to Caudwell Youth in January this year. It's really good. It consistently tops the rating for UK databases. There's an annual survey, and that seems to be at or near the top every year. Other databases, Donify is very good. Again, it has that sort of if you're starting out in collecting supporter data, it's free for a while. Then you get to, I'm not sure if it's 500 records, and the charges start coming. But yeah, quite a popular database for charities. Airtable I've seen agencies use successfully for sort of data management, and I think that is quite cost effective. So I think that's one to look at. The other ones, I've used Blackboard but not eTapestry. I don't think that scores very highly for sort of cost effectiveness for smaller organizations. Salesforce is quite techy. You probably need a sort of database manager who's sort of used to working with Salesforce to think about that as an option, I would think. But again, some options to look at. Thinking about how you can kind of manage data as well. Some of these you can hold. So MailerLite's quite good for sort of holding data, not just sort of email data. It's a bit more extensible than that. The People's Fundraising, again, it seems to score reasonably well there. And of course, you can use Google Sheets to hold data. You want to be moving towards a sort of a CRM, I think, when you start having lots of data, but that can be a starting point for you if you don't go for an integrated solution, or you can't really afford the costs of having a database alongside your email tool. So you'll have all these slides at the end, as I say, but I think it's worth sort of reflecting again on the staff time element. If you can bring stuff together, so that idea of Donify plus the really good sort of API integrations to the payment methods, that's a good one. Some databases integrate really well with sort of email tools, so that feels quite seamless, the sort of upload and download of data between the two. Setting it up, you probably need someone who's quite sort of comfortable with, fairly sort of tech savvy. It might be someone who's at your organisation, but again, they'd need to sort of be really involved in the scoping of your sort of decisions there. But I think if you do get your sort of processes set up well and well understood, and if you can develop a degree of automation in those processes, you'll save an awful lot of time in the long run. So there's probably an initial cost to think about there, either in your sort of techie person's time or possibly even getting someone from outside the organisation to help with those with that sort of setup. Your content gatherer, your storyteller, needs to sort of get that base of content in to create those welcome journeys, and then also needs to be sort of given time during the working week to continue to sort of find content, find stories, film people, write up interviews, that sort of thing. Nudge people about their overdue blogs that they promise they do for you, all of that good stuff. So and I think perhaps kind of half a day a week, might be less. It depends how much time you're going to give to this and how much time you can give to it. I think you've got to make sure you're carving some time out for somebody, because it's something that will only work over time. The beauty of it is, once you're sort of positioned as an organisation in need of support, as an organisation that welcomes people in and gives them a role to play in sustaining the work of your organisation, kind of magic things do happen. You might get the occasional quite large donation. You might get the sort of offer of support from a local business. You didn't know it was a local business. It was just someone on your email list, but in fact it was the CEO of the local business. You might start to sort of find new ways into sort of local authority sort of pockets of funding or what have you. This does have a tendency to trickle out into other areas of income generation. Being out there, being on the front foot, telling your story, advocating for your work, advocating for the people you exist to serve, starts to generate some money. But there is that cost involved as well. It's not going to happen without staff making it a priority in part of their working day. And then if you do particular campaigns, big give, if you got involved in the Arts Challenge, that's going to take time. So you just need to be aware of that. Line managers need to be aware that that's going to be a sort of a priority for their team member. And then Christmas appeals as well. Think about how you're going to tell that story, different angles, get people on a bit of a journey. Think about the different sort of content touch points you're going to need over possibly a sort of a month or so, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, so that you can give people plenty of opportunities to help. So is it worth it? Well, I mean, I think it is, if you're able to keep going, and it's about consistency. It's about the sort of drip, drip, drip. What is really useful is that you start to think about storytelling. You start to think about communicating impact in a different way. Absolutely key to kind of use this, because you're creating nuggets, so you're finding nuggets of gold around your organisation. It's really important to keep using those, and it's a good discipline actually to keep sort of reminding everybody of the work that you do. And I think, being in touch regularly, you are sort of building awareness. You're building a relationship with every touch point. Some people are going to say, okay, well, I've heard enough. I don't want to know they're going to leave, but they're not likely to be the ones who are going to help you anyway. So, I think there will be a core of people who want to hear from you, who are interested, who've been aware of you, are learning more about you. You build community, you reinforce other channels, other elements of your income generation activity. You cross-sell, you might be selling program participation or tickets to events. To Katie's point, you allow others to advocate on your behalf. It's really powerful, actually. You create potential volunteer recruitment opportunities or other ways people might get involved. And there is something kind of powerful internally about describing work and impact. If you're regularly writing grant applications, then you'll have to do this anyway, but you might find you're coming at it from different angles when you're creating content for a different type of audience. And then that thing about connections, the local business person, the counsellor, the service organisations, Rotary Lions, whoever. There's loads of people in your community that actually are looking for opportunities to help and to be involved. And when you start sort of sending messages out, you start to unearth those people and start to find people stepping forward. But again, consistency is the key there. So you did have some questions. So thank you so much for having some questions. Shall we? Are there any questions that occur, or shall I bash through these questions and then we'll have your questions? What do we think is best?
I'm happy to do some live maybe, and then we can always, it's up to you really. I've also launched our evaluation survey at the same time, just because I think some people might be jumping off for a 12 o'clock call.
Yeah, of course.
Has anyone got any immediate thoughts that they'd want to ask now, just while Joel's here and we've got the time? You can put it in the chat or raise your hand, or he can go on to the question section because we have some collated anyway.
And this is the best thing about having questions in advance. So again, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a look at the ones that were submitted then, unless I can't see any ones.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So any techniques for giving people opportunities to donate without feeling invasive, which could put people off engaging with your work and content? Yeah, really good question. I think you've kind of got to have confidence when you're fundraising. You've got to be confident that you're asking for something that has value, that's going to help people, and that that people will be willing to support. And not everybody will give. It would be wonderful if they did, but it's a small fraction, absolutely. And I think, you've got to feel, that it's your right, really, to ask for help, to ask for support. I think there's something about frequency. We wouldn't ask every day, would we? We wouldn't ask for amounts that were inappropriate. We wouldn't go around saying, can you give 500 quid necessarily? I'm doing a major donor session in a few months. We wouldn't be saying that. We'd be saying a few decimal points north of that, potentially, depending on the person we're talking to. We wouldn't want to use guilt-tripping language. Make people feel, that unless they give, something absolutely terrible is going to happen. So when we're thinking about urgency, let's bear in mind how that message lands with people. And the beauty of fundraising and giving is it's a voluntary activity, isn't it? And I think you ask with an open heart, and you hope that people are going to be able to help. You accept that not everybody can, and you thank like Billio. You're really grateful, because we are. People have there's no requirement to give, and when people do give, it's a wonderful thing. So you've got to be a bit brave. Actually, you've got to screw your courage to the sticking post and say this is important. And I think it's so important that I'd like to ask you if you can help us. How can we be most effective with little time and money? It's absolutely something that's been front of mind while I've been thinking about these slides. I think the automation piece is really important. If you can get the data up from your web forms into the email list, get those emails sending, straight away with a programmed trigger, so the your welcome email goes, email 2, email 3, and so on, and the system is unsubscribing people and taking them off the lists as you go. So that whole workflow that you'll create is really, really important. Making sure that you're kind of being efficient in the way that you're gathering the stories, so you know that something's coming up. So think about who might tell that story, what questions you might like to ask them, and don't worry, don't spend loads of time in kind of post-production, with the content. Actually, the story is the important thing, not sort of we're not sort of trying to win art awards with it. It's about getting the message over. So sort of be realistic about how long you want to be spending on that, but really just kind of just get those stories, and try and learn as you go. It'll be a lot quicker the next time you set up an automation than the first time. So with everything, there's that kind of learning phase, but you'll find that you will become more efficient with time as well. Big do's and don'ts about sort of maintaining, distributing, managing mailing lists. Absolutely crucial that you're confident that the unsubscribe function's working. We will have people stopping. There's one charity that I cannot get off their list, and actually it's kind of terrible. I keep thinking I'm going to tell the ICO of them, because they really do just keep emailing me for years and years. And then I thought, I can't do that, so I don't. But it does annoy me every time it happens. So make sure the unsubscribe is working. Make sure you mention that, I'm sorry guys, there's a possibility you might be asked for money. So I like to do that. As ways you can help. I think that's a nice soft way, and it also encompasses, I really don't know if there are volunteering opportunities. The venues, I don't know, whether there are things that you can do. It takes an awful lot of resource to manage volunteers, of course, so it's free labour, but not free entirely. But ways you can help is a nice formulation, I always think. So you make sure you've got that purpose, that sort of processing data purpose in there, and make sure people can unsubscribe. Once you've done that, actually, then you're fine. If there are people who you understand from their communication with you might be vulnerable, be really careful about that. If you really don't want to communicate with people under 18, then consider having age, and explain why you're asking for age on that basis. And then if you really do want to keep people away from fundraising, then you'll have to think about segmenting your list. So you've got one where you're happy for people to be encouraged to contribute, and one that they mustn't get a fundraising message. But I really would challenge you to say, like, who can't be asked to support? We can ask people for help. But there may be people you really don't want to. So in which case, segmentation there would be important. How many times should you email a partner? I would leave that decision with them. So I would make sure the unsubscribe is really clear. Don't hide it away too much. If you'd rather not hear from us anymore, please unsubscribe here. Make sure that process is as friction free actually as it was to come onto the list. People, we've got no right to sort of have anybody's attention, have we? But equally, don't worry about unsubscribes. If you're sending something that's like massively offensive and loads of people unsubscribe, that's an issue, but I don't suppose we'll be doing that. So don't get too hung up with unsubscribes. They weren't the people who were going to give to you anyway. But yeah, leave with them that decision. I think it is. It's this isn't going to be like the magic kind of beans. We're not going to get that beanstalk up overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take planning, and it's going to take sort of conscientious work, which will reduce over time. But if you stop doing it, then the money's not going to come. So you need to kind of commit to it, I think, organisationally. So I hope there have been some practical tips here to help with that. Thinking about how we sort of frame the ask and how we gather information. Streamlining is all about the automation. I think the machines can do so much, can't they? And actually getting those processes set up at the start, I think, is really key. And I would say, if you can, afford someone's time, to come in and do that, if you don't have the skills in house, then it's probably worth making that investment, because I don't think you're talking about loads and loads of time. But if you can't do it yourself internally, it might be an investment worth making. And then, I was careful not to give too many recommendations in the slides. The ones that, if I were in your position and I were looking to sort of to buy some software, or to kind of to start using particular software, both for sending and then gathering the data and then processing donations, the ones that I've put in sort of blue text are the ones that I think I might start kicking the tires of first. But I'm not really I'm not hugely techie, I have to say. So it's really about the technical capacity you've got. It's about what platforms you might already be using and how well might they integrate into any new platforms you might consider. And make sure that's a kind of decision that the right people are involved in. You've got the people who might be in charge of making it work, and you've got the people who might be in charge of doing it once it's up and running, doing the work. So you need to be comfortable, and then of course you're going to have a cost envelope for this. What's the budget available? Those need to be involved as well. So I hope that was helpful. I think we've run pretty well to time, but we've got a couple of minutes if there are any last thoughts or questions. There's my details. Do stay in touch if you'd like to.
Thank you. I can circulate your details as well, so people have got them on the email. But thanks everyone. I hope that's helpful. Bang on time. That extra 15 minutes sometimes is useful, isn't it? At the end of these. Lots of food for thought. So thank you.